There's nothing quite like messing about on the water. The River Cam in Cambridge is famous around the world for its age-old tradition of punting. But while this water looks tranquil, there's a problem. There's not enough of it.
The amount of water we're taking out of the ground to drink is not sustainable. That's the main problem, and that's having impacts on the river here in Cambridge, but also in the chalk streams further up.
When you're here in the middle of Cambridge, it's very hard to see there's a problem.
That's because the water is very ponded, held back by the dams and the sluice gates, but the flow here is really low. It's at 33% of its long-term average flow. It's moving so slowly that you get more build-up of nutrients like phosphorus, you get more plant growth, more algal growth, and less oxygen in the water, which is bad for fish.
When is crisis point?
I think we've passed crisis point, and the Environment Agency know there's a problem, the government knows there's a problem. There should have been some action before now.
Further upstream at the River Granter, water levels are at their lowest for decades. Mark Huntsman is responsible for managing and maintaining part of this rare chalk stream.
I've been here for 22 years and I've never seen it as bad as this. What we're looking at here is a dried up feeder stream that once flowed from these woods behind us here right through the whole year, and it's now completely dry.
What's the cause of this?
It's a combination of lack of rainfall and over-abstraction, and the springs dry up and you end up in a real problem.
To you, that all comes back from the water company just taking too much water
Absolutely.
day in, day out.
There is no doubt about that whatsoever.
So are we in a drought? Is that what's happened?
I think we're almost certainly in a drought without any question at all.
But it hasn't been declared as such?
No, it hasn't.
As a drought hasn't been declared in this area, the water companies aren't doing anything wrong in abstracting water from the ground, as long as they keep within the terms of their licence. In neighbouring Hertfordshire, the River Mimram is in an even more critical condition.
Normally this should have crystal clear, pure spring water emerging from the ground in a steady, cool flow. There should be aquatic invertebrates, freshwater shrimps, mayfly larvae, which in turn feed the fish species.
Yeah.
They've all gone from this section now.
Chalk streams are incredibly rare. It's thought there are only around 200 in the world, and chalk-filtered water can sustain a rich variety of aquatic life. So the fear is this does damage for many years to come?
It can leave a very long-lasting effect on this river.
So I've seen this here now in Hertfordshire and in Cambridgeshire, but it's not just these two counties.
It's happening all across southern England where there's high population pressures.
The water companies we spoke to say they are encouraging consumers to use less water. But the people I've met say that tougher action is needed. So what is the Environment Agency doing about this?
I've been to see some rivers that are bone dry or are drying up. Why is this happening, and why haven't you declared a drought?
This is climate change, Joe. Simple as that. We're seeing the results of a succession of dry winters, 3 dry winters in parts of the south and southeast of England, and we're using ever more water. And it's a job for all of us to think about how we use water to minimise the impact on the environment.
So why not declare a drought?
It is a drought. We are seeing real impacts on the ground. We in the Environment Agency have been focused on trying to minimise the impacts on the environment, providing water for people and industry as well.
If you declared a drought, people would be aware, they'd be more conscious of the water they're using.
We have been talking about the needs for action for a couple of years now.
No, I'm sure you have,
Joe.
but you have the ability to ask the Secretary of State
We do.
for a drought order.
We do.
Why wouldn't you do that at this point?
Because we're not at that stage yet, Joe. We are working with water companies and
Why aren't we? This is an environmental drought. The rivers have gone, they're drying up.
in some catchments in southeast England we have an issue, but it's targeted and focused on those catchments only. Our staff are out on the ground day in, day out, working with water companies, working with farmers and others to try and reduce water use. And that's the most important thing to do.
From what I've seen, our water consumption is having a major impact on the environment. And no matter where you live in the country, drought or no drought, it's clear big changes are needed if we're to preserve our rivers and the wildlife that depends on them.
Well, Joe's here with us now. Joe, it's really hard to believe that there's a drought considering all the rain that we've been having recently. Like, how does that work?
Right. I mean, first of all, I can take credit for that rain because since we've made that drought film, it's rained non-stop. But in all seriousness, you know, this rain doesn't solve anything. Just as 2 sunny weeks don't create a drought, 2 rainy weeks don't solve a drought. And in many ways, if I put it quite simply, it's sort of the wrong sort of rain. Like, it's rain that's coming down very intensely, it's landing on hard earth, it's washing off, we're losing it, it's going into the sea. What we're talking about here are chalk streams and rivers. Now, they flow because the chalk aquifer, the chalk in the ground, is like a big sponge, and it beautifully cleans and filters the water. It's sort of God's gift to drinking water, really. And that water comes up, springs up, and that's what creates these rivers and streams. Well, this chalk groundwater is very, very, very low because we keep, well, there hasn't been enough rain, but equally we just keep drinking and using too much of it. It's going to take a long time for enough rain, and we need sort of continuous rain falling sort of all through the winter and beyond to percolate through, to saturate the soil and then drip into the chalk and start to fill up that groundwater again. So unfortunately, the recent rain just doesn't solve anything.
Right. So since you were talking to the Environment Agency on that film, they've changed their tune a little bit, haven't they?
Yeah. Well, they have, and they have said there is an environmental drought. There isn't a drought order. You know, they haven't sort of asked the Secretary of State for that, but they have said there's an environmental drought in East Anglia, in the areas north of London, which, well, we could see for ourselves. You know, rivers drying up with the very definition of an environmental drought. So at least they've said that, and hopefully that, you know, helps people. But I don't think it's just those areas. I think in Hampshire, the word drought has also come up recently. The Environment Agency, you know, issued a drought permit for a water company there, Southern Water, to take more water out of the River Test, which is an incredibly precious, protected river. So things aren't all rosy there, even though that's not a drought yet.
So they've declared it.
Yeah.
How's that actually going to change anything?
I don't know, really. I mean, that was their point when they were saying, well, if we do declare it, so what? You know, does it change anything? I think the hope is that all of us take notice of it and use a bit less water. But equally, I think we have to show the system isn't working at the moment. You know, the lack of rainfall isn't really the cause of this. It's exposed the problem. The problem is, over the last 30, 40 years, this beautiful chalk water we get in the south and the southeast has been there, and we've used it, and we've kept using it. But we keep building homes, and there is no more chalk water. It's not sustainable, the amount we're using. So the big problem is we don't have the infrastructure. We haven't built the reservoirs, the pipes from wet areas of the country over the last 30, 40 years. That's a collective failure. That's on sort of the nation.
Yeah.
We need to sort that, and hopefully things like this environmental drought will focus attention on that.
Well, it's definitely not going to be the last we're going to hear on this.
Yeah, thanks.
But cheers, Joe.